Good day. Today we take our talk further. The last talk I did was kind of a summary about where we are in our talks here on my podcast. And it's about the God of the Old Testament and the way we look at him and kind of describing who this God was. And in the end came to a conclusion, or for many a very startling conclusion, that this God of the Old Testament is not the same God than what Jesus referred to as his Father. And there are very good reasons for that. And if you go back in my podcasts, you can go and see what these reasons are. It is quite interesting that this God is also portrayed within the traditional Christian faith, that this God is the creator of everything and that we exist thanks to this God and the actions of creation. So today I want to go and stop and create the creation story as we find it in Genesis 1. Now, if you go and look at the book of Genesis, the first couple of chapters, there are three different creation stories. The first story that we start with is the well-known creation story that God created over a span of 7 days. The seventh day he kind of rested. God is being portrayed, or I should say not God, but the gods, because that is how Genesis 1 starts. It said, let us make, this earth and heavens, let us create. And it also used the word Elohim, which is the plural of El. El is God, Elohim is God. So the gods came and said, let us create. This word create, or the word that we translate into the English language as create, is in the Hebrew language. It has a slightly different meaning. If you take the original Hebrew word, it means recreate or remodeling or making it over, model it into the same than what it was before. That is more or less what the Hebrew language word that we just translate with the one word create actually means. So what it says is that when these gods came and said, let's create these heavens and earth, it actually said, let's recreate this. So something had to happen before, and that is what we believe when we refer to the deluge, which is the flood, which destroyed everything. The second hint that we have within the creation story that refers us to this is that everything was desolated. It was chaos. It was, the spirit of the gods went over this chaos and there was no order and everything was like turned upside down. So there should have been a civilization or civilizations or a livable earth before this catastrophic event. And then there is this recreation or remodeling of the world and the earth that we are living on now, or recreating this space for a new civilization in which we are now to develop. These older civilizations that I refer to, there are various studies, archaeological studies, in who these civilizations were, where they were on the face of the earth, and there's evidence. There's, for instance, the sunken city just off the coast of modern-day Cuba. There are various archaeological findings and discoveries of these ancient civilizations, which shows us that they were greatly evolved and sometimes on a higher level than what we are. Not sometimes, I think most often on a very much higher level than what we are. We as a creation then started to develop from this creation story which the gods created or remodeled the earth that we live on. Now, if you take the 7 days, or let's rather say the 6 days, because the seventh day is the day of rest, so nothing in creation happened on that day. So the first story of this creation is that these gods created the first order, which is an order of bringing a difference between the darkness and the light. Now, if we go into life, that is kind of where the spiritual life and religious faiths centered around, between the darkness on the one side and the light on the other side. Now, for Christianity, this is very important, and we will get to that into later podcasts and presentations from me, where we look in depth into this darkness and light. For now, it's important to understand that this creation or recreation started with creating the first order, and the first order that we have on day one is the division between darkness and light. Then the second order is that there is space for life. There is an order of, let's put the waters on one side, the earth on one side, the ground that we live on, and the air on the other side, breathable air, or the clouds or the heavens that we refer to so often. So that's the second order that's being created. Now we can live on this earth and we can develop, because there's an order that says we come from the darkness into the light. And that, that's all about religion and faith and spirituality, is this journey towards the light. Much has been written about that. For instance, we have the dark night of the soul, the dark night of the senses, that leads us towards an awareness of light. Now, awareness in all of this is very important, because there is only one awareness. There's only one consciousness, which encapsulates everything. It encapsulates the whole creation, and it encapsulates beyond this what we can see with our eyes. And remember, it's just a slight sliver of information that we, with these three-dimensional eyes of us, that we can see. There's much more that we cannot see. Scientists say today only 5% of creation we can actually observe with our eyes. 95% we cannot observe with our eyes. We've spoken about that as well. So if everything is consciousness, then I would like to refer to that consciousness, that awareness, as being God. It's not this old man on a throne, or it's not Yahweh of the Old Testament that had to be kept happy with all these sacrifices and things. It is this absolute, undescribable awareness of being, that within that awareness creates this space for life, which we represent within this body, to evolve and to develop and to become closer and closer to that ultimate awareness. So that is what we have when we speak about the creation of the 7 days. It's creating this space. Day 1, day and light. Day 2, heavens above and the earth, division between water and the earth itself. Day 3, then we can go on. So now we have earth, and we can put plants on the earth, because the other things that will follow needs this. And then only on day 4, the sun, the moon, the stars, and all of that heavenly elements are being created. So that tells you this story is way more than just the creation of physical things. Because how could there be day 1 and day 2 and day 3 if the sun did not exist? How could there be a morning and an evening and a night and a day if the moon and the stars and the sun didn't rise in the east and set in the west for the first day and second day and third day to end, and the moon come up and the stars shine at night? It just doesn't make sense. How can you have day and night 3 times before creating this elements that creates for us the light and the night where we live on this planet today? So this is not a story to take literally. God came and said, oh, we create this, and first day this, and the second day this, and the third day that. That is absolutely only half a truth. The truth is, it's these state of beings that's being created, a state of being where we as human beings can find ourselves. Now, we also know that we develop. There's state 1 and state 2 as being in our minds as being hell. It is painful. It is nothing actually. Life cannot exist there. And then suddenly in the third dimension, beyond this first and second dimension, we have this beautiful thing that happens, that we can preserve or observe the physical world, and we can observe the spiritual world, and we can start having religion and faith and all of that things. That is a development and in our human consciousness. Now, if you go back to the creation of the days, that would be between day 3 and day 4, because day 4 you have these heavenly elements, and suddenly human beings can start looking up and say, okay, there's something more than only this earthly existence. There should be something out there. And that is what all of these religions in the world has this common thing of observing, looking out, trying to describe the God out there so that our life here can make sense and we can develop. So these are different states of being, different states of awareness. And all of this awareness is captured within one consciousness or one awareness, which is, of course, God. Now, the people of the time observed this as different gods. There was the sun god, Ra. There was the moon god, Ya. There was the star gods, star constellations, which have been seen as these different gods out there. And they communicated with people here on earth in various ways. And we find that back here on day 4, we kind of have the ability to start to develop religion. Now, for us, according to many, that is roughly 6,000 years ago. It's much more than that. The catastrophic event that I referred to in the beginning should have taken place around about 12 to 13,000 years ago. And that was just one of many. Before that, there are ancient civilizations that we uncover today in archaeological findings or find under the sea, because now we can dive deeper and deeper, and now we discover all these things, which mainstream media, of course, won't talk about. And these civilizations existed. And before them, there were catastrophic events destroying, for instance, something like the dinosaurs. That did not happen during the big flood or the deluge. Dinosaurs goes back millions of years. So this planet has seen many catastrophic events, many civilizations, and we are the latest one, and maybe also the less developed one. So on day 5, it is creating the birds in the sky and the fish in the sea. Now we know water is life. Water brings about this flow from ourselves as a spiritual image, which Jesus also referred to when he says, in later days, the water of life will flow from you. You will have this wisdom, this knowledge that will flow like a stream of water. So now that becomes possible on day 5, that can actually be a reality for us. And day 6, human beings realize who they are. They can start to see themselves, analyze themselves. And that is where we go into our own minds. Also a message from Jesus Christ. Where do you find the new kingdom of God? It is within you. You do not need to reach out to the stars and the moons and the heavens anymore. You now need to reach within you after you gained the knowledge to find this kingdom of God or this God within you. And if you do that, you can move to day 7, which is a day of rest, a day of recovery, a day of healing, a day of enjoying who we truly are. Back to our consciousness development, we are on level 3, moving over to level 4, and you will see that on level 4, which is kind of an in-between level between the physical life that we live here and the metaphysical life that we will live in day 7, to call it that way, of creation, where we become these spiritual beings. So this movement between level 3 and level 5 and then 6 later on, this movement is also a movement to a higher consciousness. Now, what do we mean by that? A higher consciousness is a different way of being aware of what's going on with us, what's going on around us, and what is or where is our place or space within this bigger cosmos or this bigger universe, which is a metaverse. Now, a metaverse means there are more than one universes. We are only in one of many universes. In this universe that we find ourselves in, there is many galaxies. We are in the Milky Way galaxy, and now we know the Milky Way galaxy is a combination of two galaxies. We have the smaller Saturnalia galaxy that moved into the Milky Way, and this happened. And when this happened, there's collisions. And some of those collisions may have created these catastrophic events on planet Earth and create the ideal situation for life to redevelop or remodel itself on this planet, the creation story. So within this metaverse, we have multiple galaxies, of which we find ourselves in two galaxies, the Milky Way and Saturnalia combined now. It's kind of the Milky Way is the big daddy, and it draw in Saturnalia and kind of capture it within it. So the stars that we see above us is more than just the Milky Way, it's also Saturnalia. So within this galaxy, we then have our solar system, of which there are trillions and billions of solar systems within our galaxy. And in this specific solar system of the sun and our planets, we find Earth in a specific position where life can develop. And as soon as we start to realize that, we move out of this just materialistic state of mind, I just want to gather and I want to become rich. We move beyond that into a state of mind where we become more rational about our place and our role that we play within this whole universe or cosmos that we find in. God becomes way more than just the tribal God of the Old Testament, the Yahweh God of the temple in Jerusalem. God now becomes consciousness, becomes everything out there, because within that consciousness we find the different galaxies and the different universes. It is actually just mind-blowing if we start to observe and to understand how big the bigger picture of who we are actually is, and how big the bigger picture of where we find ourselves within just the physical universe or the metaverse that we now can refer to. And that creates a new humanity, day 6 within the creation. A humanity that can start to see themselves, or I see myself for who I am. The saying goes, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. So on that day 6, that is what we can start to understand, because it also describes the action of Genesis 2 verse 7, which says this Spirit of God, or this Nephesh in the Hebrew text, bring life within this physical body, and then I become a living human being. And that is the phase where my consciousness and my understanding develop to a higher phase, level 5, and then later on level 6, where I can start to understand who we truly are. We are not here just to gather a materialistic or a physical life and riches. We are here to develop our consciousness and our awareness to a higher state. And that is what the creation story is trying to tell us. Now, where does this story come from? But before I answer that, the end of this creation story is this absolute state of freedom, of healing, of happiness, which is the rest day on day 7. And that is what we call Christ consciousness, also level 7 of consciousness within our understanding as human beings. And that is what we strive for. Now, you can imagine how difficult this planet is, or the situation that we live in is, because there are people on a third dimensional level which understands everything just being materialistic, and that's my whole life. And I will step on you to be successful in this company or in this work that I do or in this life that I live. So that's the third dimensional world. And within that world, now we find people on a fourth dimension, which starts to say, there's more to this than just this physical world. There's an awakening that takes place, a light that we can see beyond this physical eyes of ourselves. And then there are people already in the fifth and the sixth level. So you have the division of humanity into 3, 4, 5, and 6 different dimensions. And that creates a difficult situation, especially for those on a higher awareness. I'm reluctant to use the word higher. I would rather use the word on a different level of awareness or consciousness, because you cannot just jump into level 6. You have to move through all these levels. That's why we had day 1, and we had night and morning day 2, and then we have night and morning day 3. There's a definite flow of development within the creation story, but also within us in our conscious and awareness development. Now, the Hebrew people came across the story when they were in Babylon, in exile, after 586, when the Babylonians took them into exile. And then they sat at the rivers of Babylon, crying and longing for this God, because he stayed behind in Jerusalem. The temple was destroyed, so he didn't have a house. He didn't have a house anymore. So where was this God now? Yahweh of the Old Testament. So it was a real crisis for them. That's why the Psalms say they sat at the rivers crying, longing back to Zion, longing back to the good old days where they could go to the temple, satisfy Yahweh, and then have a good life. So there took a development place where they started to realize Yahweh should, if he wants to be our God, he should be bigger than just the temple in Jerusalem. He should be able to exist within the wider world, now Babylon and Palestine. So that's a development in how they looked at Yahweh. And it's then since then that the prophets start saying, Yahweh does not want your sacrifices. He wants your heart. So that's the development that takes place there for the prophets to start to understand. We move now from a third dimensional state of being where Yahweh is in a temple, a physical home. We bring physical sacrifices to a fourth dimension where Yahweh moves out of that house and he becomes the God that can also be in Babylon, not only in Palestine. And he's not satisfied by physical sacrifices, but by your heart, your spirit, your consciousness, your awareness. So that is where we see the start of the movement. Now, many people do not want to do that because they are scared, and we will look into that in future. So for today, it is important to understand that, like the creation story, there is a development from day 1 to day 7. There's a state of being in every of these days. There's a growth of being represented by every day till the last level of, or the 7th level. So this is really interesting. The Jewish people took this back with them when they went back to Jerusalem, rebuilt the temple, kind of fell back into this third dimension of bringing Yahweh back into the physical temple in Jerusalem. That ended in 70 after Christ when the Romans destroyed that temple. So the history of the temple is problematic. It's not a very successful building. They build it, it gets destroyed. They rebuild it, it gets destroyed as well. It's kind of like the history of this planet. There's civilizations, then a catastrophe that destroys that, then a rebuilding of a civilization, then another catastrophe that destroyed that, and now we're in this civilization, more or less 200,000 years after the first evidence of human life on this planet. So how many civilizations could there have been during this history of 200,000 years? Don't worry, we will look into that, but just kind of a reminder that we are on a specific journey moving from this physical Yahweh God to something way bigger and something brilliant when we start our own awareness development throughout these stories. See you next time.